I got to know the people who were working in the field, talked to them, learned how they were working with users, and having to do all this rather surreptitiously, which as a taxpayer and as a reporter seemed a bit strange to me. So I would go to people in central office who would become absolutely irate when you mentioned what was happening in the field, which made me even more incredulous as to how this wonderful thing being developed by the people who were going to use it in conjunction with very knowledgeable software developers could prompt such a strange reaction in central office, which wanted just to take its big shoe and stomp on all these people out in the field. So, of course, as a reporter, that definitely piqued my interest. And at the same time, a man named Paul Schaefer, who was head of the National Association of VA Physicians, had sort of arrived at the same conclusion I had, and he was actually at the DC hospital and familiar with some of the things that were being developed. And he also felt that this was the way VA should go because it would get so much more for the buck, more bang for the buck in the trite phrase, than the expensive systems that were being promoted by central office with no user involvement at all. And by the time they actually came online, they'd be not what people needed, or they'd be outdated. It took so long for them to even come up with what they thought they might want. And meanwhile, all this is happening in the field, it's real. So it was sort of this disconnect that, you know, here you had these bureaucrats building their own little empire in central office where you had the people in the field actually planting the seeds, raising the crops, and things were blossoming. Fortunately, there was also a member of Congress who was very receptive to all that, and that was Mr. Sonny Montgomery and his chief staffer, Mac Fleming, who also saw the value of what was happening in the field and was willing to listen to Paul Schaefer and to some of the developers in the field, and was able to help with his clout bring all this together. So I think it was a combination of having really some serendipity here in having Sonny Montgomery in Congress, Paul Schaefer with the National Association of VA Physicians, and this incredible group of very dedicated people that the more they were squashed, the more they rose up. So it was an exciting time, and we still see the value of what the Underground Railroad produced, and I certainly hope that what has been so carefully put together and allowed to mature and develop freely is not constrained in future. And I was just going to say, I think the one sort of tragedy in this story is that the Defense Department had the opportunity just to pick up the VA system and use it, and declined to do so because they had to go the procurement route with specifications and all that kind of silly stuff, when they could have had this wonderful system. Now they still don't have an inpatient record system. And VA's been using ITS for how many years? So, you know, again, as a taxpayer, to me, that's a big fat waste of money.
What are some of the high points you do remember? You've been involved in many of the big events and the turning points.
Well, one particular high point was when things had sort of come to a crunch point. In central office, it was sort of, we're going to put an end to this. And Paul Schaefer and I managed to persuade Don Custis, who was chief medical director in the VA at the time, to go to the Washington hospital and see what actually was there. And Don Custis did that. And that one trip, I think, made all the difference for the DHCP, because once he saw it, it's as Dr. Fletcher said before, once people see this, they realize how fabulous it is. So Don Custis went back and said, this is what we're going to do. And he made the decision to move forward with it. And I think without his action to do that, we wouldn't be where we are today.
And what year was that?
I have no idea.
1981, I think.
Okay, yes, I'm sure it was early 80s at some
Any
point.
other high points that you remember? Forget the dates.
Oh, I just remember how impressed I was with how dedicated these people were and how they were willing to put their professional reputations and even their personal welfare on the line to do what they knew was right for the system, for the veteran patient, for the taxpayer, despite all the constraints that they were working under. And, you know, it was almost kind of a little Robin Hood thing where they were trying to help the poor, being the patients in the system, and here was the sheriff of Nottingham trying to whack them down. So it was an exciting time.
Any other high points you remember?
Well, I remember the Underground Railroad banquet, which was definitely a high point, where finally everybody could openly celebrate all these wonderful accomplishments. And it was one of the best celebrations I've ever been to.